Hello guys and welcome to our channel. This is Paper Roll. In today's video we are talking about balance patch preview will be coming on 4th of October. Ariane just had a stream and talked to us about everything or all the changes that will be coming. In order to talk about it, all the community get to discuss it and see how the general feel around it anyway. I will be talking about what I feel generally about the patch and then mainly around Ranger and some maybe theory crafted around it because there is some very heavy changes. So generally, I'm not really a big fan of this patch. I've been fan of a lot of things that Reddit have made, even so it was a bit contradictory to some of what the community feel, but this one I'm not really fine with. So they are backpedaling on some of their changes, which is it's nothing wrong with that. You can make mistakes and then say it's good, but it's feel a little bit too much because some of those changes were done for a reason and now they are born back on them, which basically is a damage on CC. I was a very high advocate of it. The removal of damage from all CC skills in competitive modes was a good idea, even so it was a bit breaking symmetry on heavy hard hitting like hammer for warrior or stuff like that, because it make it very obvious that CC is supposed to set up a burst and then you would actually land the burst. So if you're fighting a very heavy CC build, you don't have to avoid everything and it become technically impossible because they can use utility skills to hit, like for warrior with charge, stomp or stuff like that, and all their weapon skills become very heavy also, like using hammer with skill like that, and then the burst skill like if a spell breaker, so you eat a CC after a CC and everything do damage while still you get hit by a burst for damage. I'm using warrior for example because they are the highest CC style gameplay in the game. You get the point. They are not backpedaling on it completely, they are not putting the damage back, but they put it on some of the skills. But it started becoming repetitive that they are removing things that they already changed, and that not necessarily for the best. The same way they are removing trade-off. Trade-off was introduced as a concept but were never followed on, which really was a problem in the game because not every class had them and they weren't equal to every class. Some were even very weird like Mirage, only in competitive and stuff like that. And they were used sometime as a way to nerf, not actually as a trade-off, which what happened with the Mirage. It was a way to limit how powerful and crazy Mirage was. However, it was also a way to make the game better to the free-to-play player because core specialization can still be advantageous in some point because they have advantage over other classes, so they don't lose something. But now it's simply a trait line, and whatever new mechanic get to be introduced, they will never have any value of it. So basically take Ranger for example. Soulbeast will have the bit swap again. Inside combat, Druid will lose absolutely nothing. Beside it, like we said, the trait are mainly support, so maybe you could say Druid are a bit different, but you have Celestial Avatar as a new thing, and there is you don't lose anything except a trait line. So maybe Druid is a bit losing something. And Untamed also gets the Unleash skills, and you can say that something as simple as bit not using their skill unless unleashed, like the auto skills, this one is a trade-off, so there is no trade-off. So basically core ranger become simply weaker or extremely useless, and that will show mostly in PvE over any other content. So that's simply one example, but for other classes things like that can also happen. Take Berserker for example, it's very increased in power. They wanted to be bursty, so they added stats 300 power, 300 condition, and remove toughness. Now the removal of toughness is gone, which means it's simply buffed for no reason and can use the normal burst and can use Berserker burst. So what even it lost? Core warrior become a joke comparing to a Berserker and stuff like that. Even Spellbreaker with the boon removal, too tanky. Bladethorn is the best maybe for PvE right now. So core warrior become extremely useless, and that was the point of making trade-offs. You could have done them better, alright, and stick to them to every class instead of making mess out of them. So some classes don't have them, some have very heavy trade-off, and some have very light one, but removing them in general was not a good idea in my opinion. Also another very unique point, many people might not agree with me on it, but I was a very high advocate of the removal of pet swap for Soulbeast in combat. I know it nerfed soulbeast a lot, and I main ranger, so it's not like I hate rangers. I love ranger. I'm a main ranger for years now, and yet I think it was a bad thing because this thing have a 10-second cooldown. So you use your bit skill, you merge with it, you use the healing and start sustaining yourself, and then get out so you can actually switch bit before the cooldown reset, and then when it come of cooldown after you use skill, you merge again, you use the damage skills for example, and then get out and then switch bit. It's a rotation thing, and to have something like that in competitive, maybe I had no problem with it in PvE, but in competitive to have something like that was like, who got his kill first, who used the stealth arrow and longbow and then started bursting before the other get chance to do anything, so they can switch their bits first, and we call that a skill. It wasn't, and it was very tanky, it very bursty. It was very bit of a mess of a class in my opinion. I did not like it, even so I'm a main ranger. However, they changed it in a way so at least I don't have to play like this if I want to play soulbeast, because of the change to Eternal Bond. Eternal Bond right now will make you able to switch bit even while combined, so you would have access to skill based on a different cooldown. Even if will be exactly the swap bits, you don't have to be forced to utilize all the tools that come into your hand. Simply by sticking to the bit longer, will at least you have some choice. So it is generally a buff, and it might make soulbeast incredibly more powerful again, because even second soulbeast, the 4 burst one, will have a chance to have support skills. They can switch to a bit for healing and bit for damage, like Worldly Impact and then Spiritual Reprieve, or they can even use something very tanky to give them access to something like Unflinching Fortitude, like a bear or whatever. Even with Smoke Scale, like there is too much things that can be done. And switching inside the merge will even offer up a whole new style of play, like between defensive and offensive. You can actually use, for example, preload lash to ball people in, and then switch the bit to actually have worldly impact right after the ball. So you can use greatsword and preload lash and stun people in it, immobilize them, and use worldly impact. So they even open a more style for melee if you like playing a melee soulbeast or something. There is a lot of option it can open, so it is a welcome change, I guess. It's not really a bad thing. I loved the changes to all the 300 trait, great reworks, and offer a chance of having any source of stability on Ranger at least. Like for Survivor traits, which is a standard full condition and power gameplay with Shared Anguish, which probably will be my choice now instead of ambidexterity to give me extra condition and word versa word. I'll be using Shared Anguish as my main source in competitive mode, but maybe I will keep obviously the higher damage in PvE. And Stormform also the same, working on elite skills. It's a very good style of thing instead of actually having strict cooldown or having passive style. This is a great idea that Arianet is having. The removal of simply passive behavior in everything is better even for skill use. Now for the worst of the worst changes probably that I do not like coming to this patch is Druid. So Astral Wisp is now ally targeted and create a circle of healing, not simply who is passed through. It's very consistent thing, it's very good and simple change. I do not mind it. It's well needed, in fact, not just I do not mind it. It's a good change. It's what need to be done. Now when we get to the glyphs, they increase the immobilize a little on the glyphs that no one uses unless you go for support, fine. And they also increase the condition removal and increase the base healing to make it a very heavy healing skill if you want to use it in support, which is a really good change for this glyph. However, we're gonna see the problems later while we go down. All the glyph use have its own problem, and we're gonna get to it in a second. Glyph of Equality, however, they increase the range inside Celestia Avatar, not outside, to stun break other allies and also break or remove condition. As you see, this is Glyph of Equality. Here, range is 300. If you inside Celestia Avatar, can grant stability is only in PvE. They did not move it to World versus World, which I expected they would do, but they didn't. But it can break stun to allies and remove condition, and they increase the radius to make it a bit easier, I guess. Glyph of the Stars is no longer channeled, which is great change. It simply cast it in a small time and you leave it in the area right now. They reduce the number of bolts from 7 to 6, and this skill now grants stability instead of prevention of condition application to allies in the area. So it probably will still cleanse 2 condition on application outside of Celestia Avatar. This is how the skill function. As you see, it removes 2 condition and it create a water field, but right now it's cast, as you can see. And inside Celestia Avatar, it heal and it give boons, it revive and it give boons. So as you see inside Celestia Avatar, if we use it, it will give vigor, protection, and regeneration, and it will do healing and reviving. So right now, an elite skill on a very high cooldown will simply remove 2 condition and boost some stability. I don't think this is strong enough. Inside Celestia Avatar, it's very good, it's functional, it's boons and revive, it can be very efficient and effective to save your party, especially if you're trying to bowl from another Zerg or something like that, or even maybe in PvP it will see some use. But we will get to the PvP thing on how a druid will still be almost unusable, as a support at least. So that change is good for stability, but the skill is very weak. I don't think it's good enough to justify it. Maybe you will have to be forced to use it always in Celestial form. Now for Glyph of the Tide, reduce the cooldown in PvE. For Glyph Equality also reduce cooldown, but as you see, all this cooldown reduction is only in PvE, while the trait Verdant Itching or whatever that name is now no longer reduce the cooldown of the glyphs. So in PvE, if you use the glyphs, that's fine. It's already reduced cooldown probably by the same amount exactly the trait was gonna give. But that's PvE only. And then it says you want to bring Druid to the part of support as Tempest and as Firebrand or even Scrubber to be able to support in World vs. World, to be used in Zergs and fights. And however, they made its cooldown longer. They maybe buffed 1 glyph. They removed a huge effect of another glyph that was very, very good use. It was very strong and didn't put anything in return. The extra condition cleanse on Celestial Avatar itself from Druidic Clarity, which we're gonna get to in a second, it will not save the Druid, it will save other, but the Druid will still struggle with stability access, very tiny, or still don't have enough boons to put as Firebrand or as efficient as a Scrubber or anything else. But as we said, the glyphs themselves is still on a longer cooldown, and you can't have as much defensive capability or even support capability to go along with it. You have a very tiny thing in everything you do, just a protection from the trait of glyphs. 1 Aegis if you use the White Tiger, that's if it's not already killed in a World vs. World Zerg. Stability only through the elite or through a bit swap, which is still very limited and only individual, and maybe in support builds you will not even take shared anguish because you might not be able to take the survival line depending on what kind of support build you will be running. You would use something like Beast Mastery and Natural Magic or something like that, or even use skirmishing for quick draw. It's technically up to the build, but it's still very limited. And that's on taking glyphs and no spirit. Obviously it's only glyphs for healing and cleanse, and everything you do is heal and cleanse and gain. And you give like a single boon, you use Warhorn to maybe some Fury on Might. Look to Firebrand for example, Aegis, Protection, Regeneration, Resistance, even Toughness increase, and the aura from Tempest besides the boons and Alacrity. Every other support do a lot, not just cleanse and heal. And even that is got significantly reduced. And Seed of Life change is very, very annoying in my opinion. They're trying to make it less skillful to play Druid, I guess. So you use it and it will bloom in 0.66 seconds. Simple as that. It will not take a second 0.32. So instead of putting the seed where you will end up, or where you know you will need the healing and cleanse, so you predict the location earlier, you will be using it almost naturally. However, it put a light field, and this light field you can apply a blast finisher in it to have more cleanse. So they reduced the cleanse from 3 condition to 2, which already a nerf. They say we need to buff Druid, and look how much they nerf in it. And not only that, the cast time of Lunar Impact as a blast finisher inside Celestia Avatar. So you would use the Seed of Life and blast finish in it by skill 3. Use 2 and use 3 inside of it. is 3/4 of a second cast time, which mean that beside even the time you need to move your finger to press things, which can, even if fast, it will take longer, it will reach about 1 second. But even if it's almost instantaneous, it's still longer than the time it will take for it to bloom, and that field will be gone. I looked at it on stream and it doesn't seem that the field will be consistent after the seed itself is used. Maybe they will change it, maybe it's not as bad once it's in the game, but right now it looks like this combo will not be possible unless someone is doing it. Inside Celestial Avatar you can no longer do that, so that nerf is not 3-2, it's actually 4-2. Now for the changes to Celestial Avatar itself, no longer Druid have reduced pet attributes, as we explained a lot of them, or mainly all, if possible, the possible one, not natural, as they explained it, like different shrouds and necro and stuff like that. All the payoffs of going elite specialization are removed, so the Druid pet is again to its full power. It's no longer 20% nerf in all stat. Nature Mender, this trait is now doesn't give a stack effect, it gives flat 15% increased healing to allies. Actually it's not to everyone, and it also grant Celestial Force every few seconds. It's basically the same change they did to Lingering Light, it get changed to this one. So right now Lingering Light doesn't give Celestial Force over 5 every 3 seconds, 5 points every 3 seconds, and fill on 100. Actually Nature Mending is the one that do it, so it's a minor. That means it will be for all Druid player, whether you play condition, power, support, it doesn't matter, you will always have it, which is a good change, I guess. We always wanted some way to have ability to fill Celestial Avatar faster, or do anything around it, I guess, especially for non-power player, and it is a bit better now. Now for Druid Clarity is one of the worst thing I hate. Yes, Druid Clarity is powerful, there's no denying this. Removing almost every condition in the game with one click of a button is considerably powerful, especially if you can manage Celestial Avatar very well, which not everyone can do. If you can always time your healing after Celestial Avatar and make sure you have damage, you actually get hit, so this healing doesn't go for away, you don't overheal, so you fill Celestial Avatar and have it always accessible after a cooldown or even before, then yes, if you can play your cards right with it, it was a powerful trait. It will remove all condition, which made it actually very good for survivability. In roaming, for example, you would enter Celestial Avatar, you will dodge, the cooldown is gone, you can get out and stealth through Celestial Shadows and even change direction and do whatever you want. So right now you're safe. That's even before using any other skill. It simply was kind of a panic button against condition. It doesn't help you against power, and you can still get CC'd if you didn't have time to do anything, you don't have access to your weapon, you don't have access to serious damaging skill or anything. So even so it has its downside, I understand it was a bit powerful. However, changing it from 13 to 3 but it heal nearby allies is a huge nerf. It's like ArenaNet, that's not even a ranger issue at this point, it's all classes issue, from classes that's too powerful, classes that's too weak. They don't care about roaming in World vs. World at all. This is an Zerg change, or World vs. World huge fights for group fights, and it doesn't look to anything else. It doesn't matter even if Druid became unplayable in the process, which I don't think it's this bad yet, but even if that happened, it's like they don't care. They wanted just to be focused on support. And I don't see even this being that efficient in competitive gameplay, or BVB I mean, and we will get to the BVB in a second. Well, Cultivative Synergy increased healing attribute scaling from 2 to 0.75, which is a huge number, so maybe it's gonna have a bump healing if you choose it instead of through Clarity through lower healing skill like Trap or stuff like that. And we already talked about Verdant Etching, which mean all glyph use will give protection, and that's it. No more summoning Seed of Life, no more cooldown reduction for glyphs or anything, just like that, which is very weak for a trait if you ask me, in the middle range, but it is what it is, I guess. And Lingering Light is no longer granted as Star Force while not in Celestia Avatar form. It got removed, like we said, to Nature Mending. So another problem with Druid. In PvP, Druid does not have the same capability as in World vs. World. It have a different balance. For example, the root is on 20-second cooldown. So does Celestia Avatar. So as you see, Celestia Avatar here is on a 20-second cooldown, and the root also on another 20-second cooldown. So even those three condition cleanses will be very limitedly accessed through Celestia Avatar. It is much weaker for no reason. I mean, with those nerf in mind, you should have at least buffed it in PvP. It's no longer this powerful, no longer this effective, so why even keeping it the same? I have no answer for that. Now let's get back to the Soul Beast, or what we talked about. Leader of the pack got increased by radius by 600, so you can support others through using or sharing stances on a much better form, I guess. Even in World vs. World now, it's much better if you ask me. And you can swap bits in combat, and we already talked about the Eternal Bond and how it will work. So you can simply switch bit. You get a button that look exactly like the trait that will work as a bit swap button. So you can, for example, use something like Preload Lash and then Maul from Greatsword, and then switch bits to do worldly impact after stunning with Greatsword 5 or something like that. So bowling people and hitting all them just by swiping bits, no unmerging needed. So it will open a whole new possibility to playing Soul Beast, which is something at least I like coming out of those changes. Who knows, maybe Soul Beast will be even superior to Druid as a condition build completely now. It's not only damage, it will be usability, functionality, or maybe even survivability. So some of the series crafting I want to talk about is basically for Soul Beast. As an example, my World vs. World build for Soul Beast is a hybrid Celestial build that use this setup. You probably already know it, Crytrone and stuff like that, Axe, Warhorn, Short Bow, and it combines power and condition damage through using one wolf back frog and Sharpened Stone, and sometimes if you want even you can use Vulture stats. So however, this build I always use my Fernhound as my bit. I probably stopped using any other bit, the one that give Unflinching Fortitude or Owl or whatever, because this is a very low cooldown comparing to Owl, for example, and I have a CC, which is a knockdown, instead of simply having access to some swiftness. And even outside Merge, I have a decent damage through Owl, but it's not very as efficient, and Owl is very easily killable, so it doesn't matter if you kill a Soul Beast bit, because they revive it simply by merging, but however, that means she was very unreliable. However, the Wolves are very tanky, and they have a CC of their own. They can do a knockdown, and it can still add to my healing and give me some regeneration to heal over time. So this was my main bit. I never change it with this build. However, right now, if you take Eternal Bond after it change, after the updates you're gonna do to it, it will now allow you to switch bit inside merging. That beside all Soul Beasts will be able to switch bit in general. So some of the ideas I'm thinking about right now is using one of the wolf, for example, like let's say the Fear Wolf. For the CC it can bot and the knockdown, and then if you merge with it, it can give you an extra CC, you can kite on it, and you can do damage. And if you switch to the other bit, let's say maybe Owl or something, so you can have an extra kiting potential and still can have healing, so Owl is completely for run away. Or even using something as Flinching Fortitude, and even an option to use Turtle, which is one of the best bits for competitive gameplay right now, because you can simply unmerge and get that protection field to destroy projectile, and with here you can heal, and in melee range you can do some significant bleed damage on your enemy, even if it's a single target. So there is a sky of open of opportunities to use with Soul Beast right now in competitive or even in PvE. I'm very excited to that change. Even so, like I said, I didn't like the idea of bit swapping to begin with in competitive modes. I never really hated it this much in PvE, maybe a little, but Eternal Bond will make me enjoy it no matter where's the area, so it will be probably my way to go in my builds in general right now. Even PvE, I might choose it over Oppressive Superiority, I'm not sure, it's just very valuable to be fully oppressing through condition bit. Like let's say in PvE itself, let's say you're running Bristol Back, the normal soul beast that we used and loved for very long. Let's use unmerged with Bristol Back, and I do not unmerge. I'm stick to it, I'm loving it, and it's great. And probably will run something like this. So it will be run like that. Extra boons, and I don't need to change it. Why? Because if I need to survive, I do not unmerge to tank to myself. I simply switch bits while merged to something like turtle or jacaranda or whatever the other bit I use, or even turtle, just to add some extra pressure in PvE. So we need higher DPS, so I can have both healing and damage. And even I can unmerge on turtle to get myself this, and then switch back to Bristol Back before merging or something like that. So all that will be tested. This is some theory crafting. I'm not telling you this will be the build, I'm not telling you this is the most effective, just the ideas I have right now. But one thing for sure, on my World vs. World Druid, I'm no longer gonna be taking a bit dexterity. I will be taking shared anguish for the stability on bit swap for both me and my bit, which is a very welcome change and I love it. However, let's talk a little bit more about city crafting for Druid. So after the change to Druid Clarity, which is gonna be an insane nerf, do I still take Druid Clarity? Honestly, I'm gonna be experimenting. I'm not sure I'm gonna be still sticking to it. Maybe the extra healing, maybe primal echoes, because it can be very strong with staff. You can kite better, you can have more access to projectile reflection, and you get 2 days enemy around you every time you switch to staff. So even inside Celestial Avatar, it like switching to it and out of it, it will still work. As you see, out of Celestial Avatar and still got the days. So other option might be good, but it will still be an insane nerf to condition cleanse on Ranger. So I might use something like Signet of Renewal instead of the Glyph, for example. So I will still have 2 stun breaks, and I will have now a source of stability in Shared Anguish. It will still remove all condition gives into my bait, and it will increase my healing over time as long as it's not on cooldown. Like as long as it's up, I will be having some healing. Like there is a lot goes into it, because this nerf like hurt us a lot. Simply using something like Healing Trap will heal for very low amount of healing, and you will put it as a defensive thing. You try to be stationary and even use a protection field inside it. Why? Because you can allow to be cleaved a lot here. You simply use dodges or have AoE of condition, because you can simply enter Celestial Avatar and get out. So you use your skill to combine with each other. Now that will be a lot more difficult. It will not be really that possible. And Druid do not really build on defenses. So a build like that, who doesn't even use a great sword for blocking, or have extra mobility from utility skills or access to stability as much. Maybe now we will have some through bit swap, but if you don't, which mean all those skills don't do much. They don't just reduce damage and give you ages or stability or anything. So you simply heal and cleanse. This was everything you have. You heal and you cleanse. And for you reduce those 2 things, the build becomes significantly weak. You had even 1 weapon to do damage, and the other one also just for heal and cleanse. We cleanse through the sigils themselves, energy and cleansing, and we just kite and heal ourselves with the staff. So it will be up to test. I will be looking into this a lot, but obviously I do not like it this much. There was few good things around in the bats. Finally came to the 300 second cooldown and stuff like that, but even so, I'm excited for soulbeast, for example. I am not looking forward to the Druid changes, and in fact I wish they really look into it. 3 are very low. Even if you wanna get it down from 13, it is very low to be just 3. And even the changes to the glyphs are not enough. They should have given at least the stability also to the glyph of equality. They should have buffed glyph of the stars. Stability and 2 condition cleanse seem like a joke, and that very long cooldown is even worse of a joke. So I'm not sure honestly about this patch. This is my opinion. Share yours in the comment, or any ideas or even theory crafts. I will be reading everything, and I will see you next time. Peace.